like to actually start with the fact that, and I looked this up before Bob sent it to me, but in their platform, the Liberals said that proponents who will spend more of New Brunswick taxpayers' money in New Brunswick would be favored over those who do not. So what do you say about all of this in light of that platform promise?
Well, we need to stand up for New Brunswick companies, and we're deeply concerned here that the government's made a decision to buy snowplows from Quebec when they could have bought them from New Brunswick companies. And that means that people in New Brunswick aren't going to be working and people in Quebec will be working.
What's wrong with that?
Well, in some cases, you can get better value. But in this case, the value of this contract is less than 0.5% of the value of the contract. And for that small amount of money, we should have had workers here in New Brunswick doing jobs rather than somewhere else.
But if the government says they abided by the bidding process and the way it's laid out in the Procurement Act, how can this be reversed or how can this be fought?
Well, I think the government had an option here. If you look at the wording of the procurement, my understanding is there's a caveat in there that the government can choose to do what's best for New Brunswick companies. And this government didn't take that option. In fact, what they did is they awarded the contract and then they actually bought another 30% more snowplows from this company in Quebec when they could have bought from New Brunswick.
What do you think that says about the tendering process or the transparency of the tendering process?
Well, I think it's important to have a transparent tendering process, no doubt. But in the contract itself, my understanding is there's provision to benefit New Brunswick companies. And for some reason, this government chose not to do that.
So what are the options now legally that this government can do?
Well, I would suggest they throw out the contract. I don't know what the ramifications of that are. But I'm deeply shocked that they went ahead and went over and above the original tender and ordered another 30% more snowplows. That's something they could have easily not done. And really, the time to catch this was before the contract was awarded. They should have taken advantage of the provision they have to buy from New Brunswick, and they didn't do that.
On April 29th, I think it was that day, I was talking to Roger Malotson, who was boasting about the fact that his winter maintenance budget was more than any other government's ever spent. And he mentioned these 30 or so snowplows. If the money's not being spent here, I guess it doesn't really benefit us at all?
Well, this is exactly the concern. I think the government needs to focus on buying from New Brunswick companies. And I'd love to see the Premier explain to us why, when given the chance to buy snowplows from New Brunswick or Quebec, he chose Quebec. And if it's for $1,600, I'm sure we could have come up with it.
Are you worried it's happening in other areas of government?
Absolutely. As you know, the Premier Gallant has created this super corporation that's now going to control all government procurement. And this is the first step out the door, and we're seeing that they're not putting the focus where it needs to be, which is on New Brunswick. This government made a decision to buy from Quebec, and then they doubled down on that decision to buy even more from Quebec, and that's a concern. They should have put the focus here on New Brunswick companies.